Senator from Alabama.
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to first say how much I appreciate my colleagues, Senator Merkley, Senator Kaine, for their eloquent talks on an important issue of our time. But let me also now rise in total frustration on a completely different issue, but total frustration, bafflement, curiousness, quite frankly, just angry and disappointed in this body. I'm angry because we have turned our backs for over 40 years on military families. We've turned our backs on the widows of the very men and women who have given their lives to protect this country, to uphold our democratic ideals, and to make possible the very work that we are doing in the United States Senate, the very work that we as members of the Senate and as members of Congress are charged to do every day on behalf of the American people, and particularly on behalf of veterans and their families. I'm talking about this body's refusal to bring up the Military Widows Tax Elimination Act, refusal to bring it up for a single floor vote, despite the fact that we have 75 co-sponsors. 75 co-sponsors of this bill. It's the most bipartisan legislation except the robocall bill, which everybody could agree on. And we can't get that to a vote in this body? Where have we gone wrong? Where have the rules of the body, where have the rules that the leadership of both parties are operating under, when has that gone off the rails that we can't bring this to a vote, to just get a simple up and down vote on a process that is ripe, and that is the NDAA. You know, Madam President, I've in my 17 or 18 months, I forget how many now, in this body, I've had some frustrating moments, as I know all of my colleagues who have been here for a long time have had a lot of frustrating moments. We've shut down this government 3 times since I've been a United States Senator. 3 times. I've seen disaster relief held up for 5, 6 months, and farmers and others needing that relief, needing that money, needing that help, and we held it up for political reasons so that someone can score a point because everything is seen through the eyes of a political gamesmanship. That's how we are operating today, and it is incredibly frustrating for those of us who want to make sure we go forward with things and we see bipartisan efforts. And in this situation, we are talking about military families who are getting ripped off by us. You can call it the government if you want to, but at the end of the day, they're getting ripped off by every single member of this body and the House of Representatives, and they've had. It is no wonder that the American people think Congress and Washington in general is just completely broken. If we can't fight for military widows and spouses who are having their survivor benefits shortchanged, then who are we going to fight for? Who are we going to stand up? We always talk about standing up for the least of these. I got people wanting to stand up for the immigrants coming across the border. I got people wanting to stand up for corporations and to make sure that they are paying fair shares of taxes as opposed to overburden. I got people standing up for people every day, but here we've got a chance to stand up for people who have given their lives for this country, and we're not doing it. We are not doing it. If we can't do the right thing on this, how can we possibly, with 75 co-sponsors, how can we possibly tackle immigration reform? How can we possibly tackle health care reform or education in this country if we can't come to some agreement and one simple vote when we've got 75 co-sponsors? How can we not fight for people like Kathy Milford, a retired school teacher from Mobile, Alabama, whose husband passed away unexpectedly 25 years ago from a service-connected illness just months after his retirement from the Coast Guard? Instead of a long and happy retirement together, Kathy has been fighting to right this wrong for all of the some 65,000 military spouses who are hurt by current law. During a recent visit here to Capitol Hill, she said, every time I talk about this, and she's up here a lot talking about elimination of the military widow's tax. Every time I talk about this, I have to dig up my husband and bury him all over again. Just think about that. Let that just sink in a minute. A military widow, one of many of thousands who've had to turn to lobby Congress year after year at their own expense, saying she feels like she's digging up and burying her husband all over again when she has to talk about this issue. That is not only sad, it is shameful. We've tried to pass this legislation. The Senate has in some form repeatedly over the last almost 20 years. It has been included in the NDAA numerous times, only to be stripped out during conference. It has been included without an immediate pay for, the offset, the budget issues that everybody kind of falls back on and hangs their hat on. We don't have that immediate pay for. It's passed before. It is passed before in this body with bipartisan support. But for some reason, it just hasn't been able to get across the finish line. For some reason, even though the bill today has historic levels of co-sponsorship, we're not allowed to bring it up for a vote as an amendment to the NDAA. And frankly, that's the frustration. It's a frustration that goes beyond just this bill. It's a frustration that we can't debate on the floor of the Senate anymore. We can't bring up amendments. I think we have voted on one amendment in legislation in this Congress, because the rules between the leader and the minority leader, that there's all these deals going on, that you got to have a Republican package, you got to have a Democratic package, you got to play one against the other. We're constantly playing the political games in this body when we should be working for the American people as a whole. And so that is why today, at this time, I am once again calling for our bill to eliminate the military widow's tax to pass, or to get voted on, to bring it to the floor and pass it under a unanimous consent. Every one of my colleagues would do well to remember that we are the ones who should be fighting for these spouses. We are the ones. We're the only people that they can turn to. This can't be fixed on the streets. It can't be fixed at the Department of Defense or the Veterans Administration. The legislature, Congress of the United States, is the only one that can do it. And we are the ones that should be fighting for these military spouses. The widows, the widowers whose loved ones gave their lives for our country. The widows and widowers whose lives are forever changed because of their families' selfless service to this country. Caring for military families has long been part of the foundation of our government. In President Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, he spoke in no uncertain terms on this obligation. In the midst of the Civil War, he addressed a nation that had sustained unimaginable loss in order to preserve the Union that we so cherish. The country was then more divided than it has ever had been, and God help us if it ever gets that divided again. But the values that Lincoln asserted during that speech were so fundamental that even at war with itself, they could agree on their importance. He said this: with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan, to do all which we may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves with all nations. Let me repeat that critical phrase for us today. To care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan. This is the promise that we made to those who raised their hands in service to our nation. This is the contract, the solemn contract that we have made to those who have raised their hand in service to this nation, that we will honor and support them and care for their families if tragedy occurs. President Lincoln was assassinated just over a month after he issued this appeal. But the weight of his words still resonate today, and in some ways on this issue, they resonate more. Because in those days, you can count on the fact that the legislative body, the Congress of the United States, heeded those words and took care of those families. It's been 154 years since President Lincoln spoke those words, and yet the government of the United States, the members of this body, the members of the House, have yet to fulfill that promise. 154 years, and we still get caught up in the deals that are made as to what gets on the floor and what does not get on the floor, the political deals that have to be jockeyed where we give and take, and it is one over the other. We need to fix that today. We need to fix it in a broader sense and let this body get back to its real work and be the great deliberative body that it's supposed to be. We're not doing that, but that's a different issue for a different time. Let's start today and stand up and exhibit just a fraction, a small fraction, a small fraction of the courage that these military spouses did on our behalf. Let's let our actions speak louder than words of sympathy ever could. Let's put the issue to rest and give these widows some peace. Let us do our duty. You know, it was Atticus Finch who told a jury in To Kill a Mockingbird as he closed out, knowing what the outcome was going to be, as I do here, knowing what the outcome is going to be. It was Atticus Finch who said, "In the name of God, do your duty." I say that to this body. I say that to the leadership. In the name of God, let's do our duty to these people. Let's get behind the political deals and let's do our duty once and for all. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that it be in order to set aside the pending amendment, that amendment number 269 be considered and agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.